I see many systems where the business manager's got their spreadsheet, the curriculum leader's got their spreadsheet. They don't talk to each other and they're different. I see lots of systems that are, for lots of reasons, they don't have all the data in them. We don't include that because that's funded from somewhere else. We don't include that because it's funded from somewhere else. The whole point about smart curriculum is it's all in. We put everything in. All of the, let's take a timetable in a secondary school, for example. What goes into a timetable package is usually the kind of turnaround of all the classes, but they don't put in the special needs provision, they don't put in alternative provision, they don't put out of classroom activities, for lots of reasons. But and then you'll find single bits of paper where somebody's worked it out on a spreadsheet or drawn it up. So what I would suggest is that the whole thing goes in together. I was working with a curriculum last week, and it's a very generous curriculum. But when I started asking questions, I realized that not only did they have this curriculum, but they had a shadow curriculum, which was what they referred to as an alternative provision. So 2 fully staffed classes of that provision hadn't been included. And then there was another layer of extraction provision where children were taken out of classes for various reasons, which was another 2 members of staff. So what was a 4-form entry school had 6 classes plus 4 more classes. We're talking a 4-form entry school with 10 classes of provision. And then they sort of struggling to understand why I'm saying, well, every one of these provisions, because it's 50 lessons over a 2-week cycle. If you've got staff in them for compulsory education, it's an 11 to 16 school, you're providing 1.4 teachers for each one of those elements. That's around £75,000 per class to buy teachers to achieve that. So if we add 4 classes, that's £300,000 worth of staffing on top of what is already a generous provision. Now, the eyes of people at that point kind of widened. Oh wow, we had no idea. That's and okay, they get extra provision, but nowhere near that kind of grant funding. So smart curriculum, in terms of its understanding, is an all-in provision. It's saying let's look at all that you do and how do these things work together. Now, primary education primary phase generally look at it and say, well, we don't have any of that. We simply have classes. Well, when you then look at the fluctuations of role, you start to understand that, well, year 3 has got 2 classes, but they're 2 classes of 15. What, do you need to have 2 classes of 15? Now, given what I've said in other places about lowering class sizes in the younger years, I would perhaps deal with that a little bit differently rather than just simply saying, let's merge those 2 classes. But there are solutions for schools. What I'm really alluding to is growing the understanding of all that's going on and putting the whole thing together. I'll give you another example. So a school that I was working with just before the summer break were looking at their analysis and saying, well, okay, we've got something like 200 or 300 teaching periods that are unassigned to any teaching. 200 or 300 equated to £264,000 worth of teaching. Now, they said they were using that surplus staffing to patrol the school. So they were doing management by walkabout or on call, or lots of different names for that process. But they had no idea that was costing them somewhere in the region of £260,000. They were quite surprised when they saw that. And their first reaction to it was, we need to go back and reevaluate whether this is being effective, because £250,000 to spend on staff walking around the building holding radios, not to diminish the need for that. In some schools, that's really needed. But in terms of its strategic impact, now that we would have to question whether those resources could be better spent on the classroom, and it might be on changing class sizes or putting different resources into the classroom. Those processes are things that come out of this dialogue. So all in, all understanding, affects strategy, opens people's eyes to understanding, and then it makes us more strategic about how we're using our resources.